Boom, 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 boom. A side, B side. What side are you on?
Hey, welcome back. It's A Side, B Side podcast. I'm Brooke Summers. That's Adam Weingarten. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing very well. It's been a weird week in Minnesota. We were very cold last week, and all of a sudden it's 70 again. So I am discombobulated, but I like it.
There is a lot going on. First of all, this week, we have to address this. Young man, Jonathan Price in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Our thoughts and our love going out to the Price family. Actually had someone message us on our Instagram that is from that town and was telling us all about this young man. And she said it's not an exaggeration when they say that everyone in town loved him.
Yeah.
And that officer that is responsible for his death has been arrested. Bond was set at $1 million. So, step one, that's the good news, I guess.
And it shouldn't be as shocking or surprising as it is that how quickly this happened. But I think more than anything, this is a indication of how all the work that so many people have been doing over the last, 50 years, 10 years, 9 months especially, is making a difference. Because the fact that someone was a white officer, was arrested and charged within hours, not days, shouldn't be, but it is shocking and encouraging. And hopefully this trend can continue, because we are slaves to everything that we like. As people who are not there, we have to understand through someone else's account. And there have been many accounts that felt like this reaction should have happened in those accounts. But quite frankly, arresting someone and charging them for murder, that is a big and disheartening on one level from a global standpoint and a history standpoint, but encouraging on a progress standpoint that maybe this is a step further. There's a lot to come. There's a lot that has to happen. But the fact that someone was arrested and charged with murder this quickly, hopefully, is a sign of progress.
We'll have to keep our eyes on it. I just feel like if they arrested him that quickly and the Texas Rangers were involved, there's serious evidence against him. On all of our websites, there's links if you would like to donate to the Justice for Jonathan Fund that was started by one of his best friends, a former baseball player. What is his name? I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but he's the one that started the GoFundMe for his family for all the expenses. And I think the saddest part of all of this is that, from what I heard, Jonathan not only was a big supporter of law enforcement, but also I think was wanting to become a law enforcement officer. So also October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Episode 9, we talked about the Terry Jandusa story. She has an amazing survivor story, which is rare on a true crime podcast. But also, if you find yourself in need of help or someone you know and love is in need of help, on our Facebook and our Instagram, we have the phone number 800-799-SAFE, thehotline.org. If you are on their website and you find that someone comes into the room and you need to exit quickly, search histories and all that, their website, it's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website, if you click the big X or if you hit escape twice, it does not show in your history. So that's something that I want to stress. If you need help, there are resources. It's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So please, 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 especially if you're at the age of 40 and over, get your mammograms. Ananda Lewis, who we remember from MTV years ago, just came out and she's in like stage 3 or 4 cancer. And she said, I wish I wouldn't have been stubborn. I wish I would have gotten the mammograms. Yes, they're uncomfortable. It's only a couple of minutes. They squish you and then boom, you're done. And trust me, when you don't have a lot of squish, it hurts, but you still got to do it, okay? But seriously, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Moms definitely need to take care of themselves because they're so busy taking care of everybody else. They forget about themselves. So ladies, make sure you're doing your shower checks. Have your partner help you, whatever is going to get it done. Get it done. And if you're 40, I think now they say 45 5, but 40 and over get those mammograms. Oh, TV show on Hulu, Wilderness of Error. It's all about, it's a wild one. Sorry, what?
No, you said it was a wild one. It's a tagline. Come on.
It is,
it's made me giggle.
So it's all about Dr. McDonald. I think it's Jeffrey McDonald. His pregnant wife and 2 daughters are murdered. So it's like, you think it's cut and dry. He did it. And then it's like, well, no, maybe he didn't, because there's another suspect. And then it's like, well, did she do it? No, he did it. Well, whoo. So it's all about figuring out who did that. American Murder is on Netflix. That's the story of Chris Watts and Shanann Watts. And Chris killed his wife and 2 daughters in the most disgusting way imaginable. It has come out. The documentary, if you don't know the story, the documentary leaves out quite a bit. So I would maybe research it and then watch the documentary. But Chris Watts actually killed his wife, who was pregnant. Then what I found out, so apparently he tried to kill the kids first. He drugged his wife and killed her. Well, as in the process of killing her, his daughters wake up. He puts the wife, wraps her up in a sheet, puts her in a truck, puts the kids in a truck, drives them like an hour away to where he worked, and kills them and puts them in like oil drums. And then lies about it and says, I don't know where she is. And he's looking in the camera. Oh, I just want my family to come back to me, please, if you know where they are. He is the most disgusting, vile human. I mean, if we all need to hate somebody, let's hate Chris Watt. This man even asked for pictures, to be allowed to have pictures of his daughters in his prison cell. You sick bastard. He's disgusting. Ugh. But that story is on Netflix. And like I said, they do leave some things out. I've been researching it. My mom was telling me about it, and then I researched it, and then I watched the Netflix story on it, and there is quite a bit left out. So I would research it maybe first, or, follow it up with something so you can get the full story.
Also, like, mom gets like a research also / executive producer credit. Because this is several times when like mom has told you about a story, it becomes part of the show. So I feel like
well, I told you I get it honest. Yeah. I am a true crime lover, and it is completely 100% honest from
I'm just saying, if she wants to update LinkedIn with executive producer of podcast, I'm not going to stop her.
All right, so anything that you want to add for the week?
I will say one thing, and it goes a couple of paragraphs back, but as we talked about breast cancer, my mother has always been one of the most impactful people in my lives. We are way too much alike, which means that when we fight the same way, and we drive each other nuts. And for the last 4.5 years, my mom has been fighting cancer in some way, shape, or form. First was breast cancer, and she had a partial mastectomy, and then they came back and said it's still there, and so they were going to do another partial mastectomy. And my mother looked at them and said, just like at this point, just what's left, take the rest. So she had a full mastectomy. And then cancer, in its most nefarious form, doesn't care where in your body it is. It went into her lymph nodes and is now in 2 tiny, terrifying spots on her liver. And over the last 4 years, while dealing with arguably the most notorious serial killer of anyone, somehow she has maintained the same attitude, the same personality, the same hope that she's always had. And I have not celebrated that as much as I should. I have hated the cancer. I've hated what it's done to her and the challenges it's had. But over the last month, as I've mentioned in every single podcast we've ever done, I've been moving and changing my life. And as I've been doing this, my mother has always been, as she ever was, someone who is more concerned about others, a teacher, a rock when everyone else is feeling emotional. And for as much as I have talked in various forms in other medias or blogs or Facebook or Twitter or any of those things about how hard it was to deal with her diagnosis, the last few months have reminded me how I have not talked about how strong she has been through everything. She has always been an incredibly supportive, strong, and selfless person. And no matter what cancer has done to her, whether it be breast cancer or any of its other delineations, I have not celebrated her strength enough as I should have. And yeah, I know they listen, so this was kind of self-serving because I know she's going to hear it, and I haven't said it to them in person enough, but she's one of the strongest people I know. And cancer sucks, but sometimes it makes you see how strong people really are.
Well, we are rooting for you, I'm not going to put her name out there, but Adam's mom. We are rooting for you and thinking of you. And of course, I've been getting the updates from you over the years. And I adore your mom. I've never met her, but I adore her.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that, but I needed to say it.
All right, so we'll be back with the B-side.
Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I sure would like to make a podcast. I've got so much to say about blank. Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, you really should. It is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. All right, I'm going to tell you why it's so easy. Okay, so with Anchor, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Trust me, I'm so excited about this. You can be too. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started.
All right, and it's time for the B-side. Now, Adam, I'm going to tell you now. You got to let me get through my story. I know you've got questions.
Yeah.
We'll get
I'm going to do my best. I have had, I'm going to stop you before it even start because I have to say one thing. I've had people who came to me and said, you had the same questions I had. So I'm glad you asked them, but I will save them to the end.
All right. So we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going back to the late 1800s. And I know you're probably thinking, the late 1800s, whatever, that's boring. But oh, no. Not when you hear the story of Bella Kiss. Yes, Bella Kiss, Adam.
Sounds like Bellatrix from Harry Potter.
Bella Kiss was a Hungarian serial killer. He is thought to have murdered at least 24 young women. And he attempted to, well, I'm not going to tell you what he attempted to do just yet. You have to wait and see. So Bella was a tinsmith who lived in Szentkoda, which is now part of Budapest. Bella was also an amateur astrologer and said to be fond of occult practices. He was also a voracious reader and highly versed in art, literature, and history. Now, Bella was supposedly a really attractive man. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, Hungarian. His neighbors thought he was just really pleasant to be around. He had a very charming, lively personality, as do most serial killers. Just seeing a trend here. Well, around February of 1912, Bella and his wife Marie moved to Szentkoda. Marie was 15 years younger than Bella. Within a few weeks of moving into the area, Marie made an acquaintance. Well, actually, she found a lover. His name was Paul
That's
Beccari.
a big difference.
And and in December of 1912, just a few months after they moved to Szentkoda, Bella informed his neighbors that Marie and Paul had run off together, leaving him all alone. Yeah, I don't think they ran off together, but we'll see. So after his wife left, wink, wink, he hired a housekeeper named Mrs. Jakubich. So Bella began to, he's a bachelor now. His wife has left him. He's all alone. He's a young, good-looking man. What's he going to do? He's going to try to meet some women, even in the 1800s. I mean, they didn't have Tinder or Bumble. So he did what they did back then. He put ads like in the newspaper. So Bella, like a single young man, met a lot of women. He began to equate himself with a number of attractive women, sometimes even taking them home. Mrs. Jakubich, his housekeeper, learned to just kind of ignore the lady parade, and she never really interacted with them. Bella was quite the eligible bachelor, of course. Townspeople began to notice that Bella in his yard was collecting a large number of metal drums.
Uh-oh.
Now, this is in the early 1900s. So Bella told authorities even came out and questioned him about it. And he said, no. It's just gasoline. I'm just trying to be prepared for the rationing for the upcoming war. I know what's going to happen, and I'm just trying to be prepared. And the police were like,
look at this guy being prepared. Mr. Boy Scout.
He's crafty. That Bella. So, Budapest authorities start looking into information on the disappearance of two widows, Mrs. Schmeidak and Mrs. Varga, both who had not made contact with friends or relatives for a few weeks. So their family members were really concerned. Both women had last been seen in the company of a man named Hoffman that supposedly lived near Margaret Bridge in Budapest, but no one could find hair or hide of Hoffman. Around this time, World War I began, and Bella was conscripted, drafted, enlisted, however you want to say it, into the military. So he leaves the house and all the belongings in the care of his housekeeper, Mrs. Jakubich, to take care of. So in 1916, authorities in Budapest get a call from Bella's landlord. And Bella's landlord had found those metal drums that we had talked about earlier on the property. And he was concerned. So the landlord explains to the authorities that Bella Kiss, his house was rented. He'd rented the house, but his lease had lapsed, and he couldn't get in touch with Bella because there was a rumor that he was either a prisoner of war or he was possibly killed in battle. So the landlord had gone on the property to see what kind of repairs the house was going to need and that he might have to, fix it up again before he could rent it out. Yeah. And of course, thinking that the drums had gasoline, as Bella had previously informed everyone, he punctured one, and this extremely disgusting, horrifying smell comes out. So it just so happened a chemist lived next door, and he told the landlord that is the unmistakable smell of human decomp. So that forces the landlord to call authorities. So Detective Chief Dr. Charles Nagy is the lead in this investigation, and he grabs two of his best detectives, and they immediately travel to this town of Sinkota. When they arrive at the house, the landlord greets them. Unfortunately, Mrs. Jakubich, who still lived on the property, still taking care of the house, as she's been told, she doesn't pay the bills. She's just the housekeeper who has been paid to do this job that she continues to do. Well, Mrs. Jakubich is like, no, you're not coming in here. I didn't welcome you. I didn't invite you. I don't know you. Get out. So she's just like fussing at him. She's yelling at him. Just like you would expect, like, I don't know. I just have this image of this little old lady who's like, no, you can't come in here.
She's doing her job.
So
protecting the house.
She is. She's doing her job. So out on the property, the Detective Nagy, opens up the drum, and inside was a sack and the preserved, pickled body of a young woman with a full head of long brown hair. Also inside the drum was the rope that had been used to strangle her. So now Mrs. Jakubich calms down quite a bit. It's like, oh, whoa, wait. I didn't know that was in there. she's questioned and she's like, I had no idea. I thought it was gasoline just like everybody else. I had no reason to bother with them. What would I be touching them or bothering them for? So the detectives examine 6 more drums. And in each drum, they find the body of a young, naked woman. All the victims had been strangled. So now detectives have to have their bodies examined. They make arrangements and they send them all to a mortician. And then they have to search the grounds, the remaining grounds, and the home. Each and every victim, including those that had been buried. So that means they found even more bodies, had been preserved in alcohol. All of the bodies were still recognizable and easily identified if they had anything identifiable about them. So maybe a piece of clothing or some initials on a piece of clothing or maybe a necklace or something. So Detective Nagy informs the military, all right, look, here's the deal. You've got a soldier. His name is Bela Kiss. You need to arrest him immediately if he is still alive. Well, here's the thing. Kiss is a really common last name.
Of course it is.
In Hungary. And it was also rumored that he was dead. Remember, he was possibly a prisoner of war or he was dead. So Detective Dr. Chief Charles Nagy detains Mrs. Jakubich and he tells the Postal Service, look, hold all mail in this case because they feared he could have been communicating with an accomplice. So they just said, any mail in this case, you have to hold it. They also feared that Mrs. Jakubich could have been involved in some way, shape, or form, especially because he had willed her all of his money in the case of his death. Mrs. Jakubich says, look, I swear I know absolutely nothing about these murders. Yes, I would see him bring women home and they would come and they would go. I made it my business not to get involved because, he's a young man. He's a bachelor. That's what he did. So Mrs. Jakubich had kept that inside of the house immaculately clean for 2 years. And she pleaded with Detective Nagy. She said, please, sir, I know nothing of this terrible thing. I knew Bela Kiss only as a man who was kind to me and paid me well. So she took the detectives through the house and she showed them Bella's bedroom, which they searched. They didn't find anything. So then Detective Nagy noticed another door. It was, of course, locked. She sees Detective Nagy checking this door out and she's like, oh, that's Mr. Kiss's secret room. He told me to never enter it and to never let anyone in. So the detective is immediately like, we got to get in there. Let us in right now. So she pulls this old fashioned key out of her apron and she opens the door and they go in the room and Detective Nagy notices that the room is literally lined with bookcases filled with books. The only furniture in the room was a large desk and a desk chair. Inside the desk, Detective Nagy finds a huge volume of correspondence between Bella and tons of women. Tons of women. He also found a photo album with photographs of more than 100 ladies. Detective Nagy begins to fear that the number of victims might be more than the ones that they've already uncovered. The books on the shelves, many of them were about poisons or strangulation. So the detective then goes over the hundreds of letters, which he finds, and most were filed in 74 packets so that mail from the same women, they were kept together. So, if he was writing Aaron, they were all kept together. If he was writing Susan, they were all kept together. Victoria, and so
as
on.
You do, filing systems.
So he noticed that these women wrote to him after seeing his ad in the newspaper. Like I said, there was no Tinder, there was no Bumble, there was no Match or Plenty of Fish.
Because this guy found enough people.
Yeah. So all of these women seem to be after one thing: marriage. They figured out after some detective work that Bella had received 174 marriage proposals. So if you think that women weren't proposing back then, you're wrong, buddy. Of those 174 marriage proposals, 74 of those women he offered to marry and continue to correspond with. My man is a player for real. I mean,
45%.
wow.
Like, what happened to the other 100?
I guess he whittled it down to
and also
who
like
he wanted.
just time and space. Like, you only have it so many times to kill people.
Oh, well, he found plenty. Something became really glaringly clear. Bella Kiss, not only was he a murderer, but he was also a fraud. He was defrauding these women of their savings. In many cases, their entire financial assets, all their resources. I mean, imagine a killer.
So the
100
he didn't pick probably
crazy.
didn't have enough money.
It.
Yeah, it was like just whittling down like the most biggest accounts.
So some of the letters the detectives discovered dated back to 1903. Remember, he was married in 1912. So kind of hypocritical if he did, in fact, kill his wife and her lover. So he would mainly select women who had no relatives nearby and no one knew, so that no one would notice their disappearance that quick. He wooed them. He would visit them. He would lavish them with gifts and attention, and then convince them to send him money. If they proved to be, too troublesome for him, well, guess what? You gotta go. And he killed him. Police also found old court records that indicated that 2 victims of his had actually initiated court proceedings against him because, well, he had defrauded them and taken their money. And both of the women in those cases disappeared and their cases were dismissed. So Detective Nagy questions Mrs. Jakubich again, and she says, look, he was a good-looking boy of 23. We were so fond of him. He was kind, and he was kind to everyone. He wouldn't hurt a living thing. She said once a dog had broken its leg and he made it splints and nursed the animal to recovery. She said, I am sure this has to be a mistake. He did not kill those women. Someone else did it. So again, she admits to seeing lots of different women come and go. She said she didn't know their names. She said, I scarcely ever said a word to them. I was only a servant and spent nights in my own home. What Bella Kiss did with those ladies was none of my business. They were all city ladies, not peasants like me. They would come for a day or two and then go away. First of all, can I just point out that, everybody thinks that this whole one night stand or whatever is a new thing. No. They were doing that stuff back in the 1800s.
We didn't have numbers hundreds. If that was happening with caves, come on.
So Detective Nagy and his colleagues questioned all of Bella's neighbors and everyone in town who knew him. No one thought anything odd about him. No one thought twice. They just thought he was a young, handsome man entertaining the ladies. The married men were envious of him because they're he's getting the ladies.
I'm reliable with the ladies.
One of the victims that they'd found had KV on her clothing, and Detective Nagy was able to trace that clothing back to Madame Catherine Varga. She was a good-looking young Budapest widow. She had a profitable dressmaking business, which she sold when she went to be with her prospective husband, Mr. Hoffman. Now, you remember, we mentioned her and a Mrs. Schmeidak earlier. So now we've found Miss Varga. We still don't know where Hoffman is, but we know Hoffman.
I feel like we know who Hoffman is.
So she went off to be with Hoffman, who we have figured out Hoffman is Bella Kiss. Catherine had no relatives to miss her when she disappeared. Through another breakthrough in Bella's home, Dr. Nagy located some clothing with the name Julian Pashek that was stitched in it. Julian Pashik, along with Elizabeth Komaromi, had each sued Bella for taking their money on the promise of marriage. Their suits also lapsed and were dismissed when neither of them appeared in court and could be found. So again, troublesome women, they gotta go.
And also,
There was enough evidence to put at least...
it seems like a very poor legal system where it's like, oh, you didn't show up. We'll just assume it wasn't real. Not like, why didn't this person show up?
It's a very different time and another country, so we don't know their
also,
legal.
like,
I mean,
as you said, women were bringing the suits. They were probably like, well, this isn't important.
Yeah. So there was enough evidence to put at least 30 murders on Bella, but only one of the 7 women in the metal drums so far had been identified. After some time had passed, 2 more women paid a visit to Detective Nagy, Mrs. Stephen Toth and her daughter-in-law. They told the detective that her daughter, Margaret, had moved to Budapest to work, and on one of her visits to Margaret, she introduced her to Bella, who persuaded the mother to give him some money on the promise that he was going to marry Margaret. Later, Margaret accused Bella of reneging on that promise. So Mrs. Toth then went to Sincoda and confronted Bella, and he assured her, no. I just want to delay the marriage to Margaret. Margaret had become really angry with me, and I just wanted to make sure things are good. And he said Margaret was so angry with him that she left him and went to America. How convenient. So Detective Nagy pieced the real story together. Here's what happened. In 1906, remember, 1912, he was married. In 1906, Margaret visited Bella. He forced her to write a letter to her mother claiming that she couldn't bear the shame of rejection by Bella and that she was going to look for a new love in America. After she'd written the letter, Bella strangled her and hid her body in that metal drum. And then he mailed the letter to her mother. On October 4th of 1916, Detective Nagy received a letter that stated that Bella had died of typhoid in 1915. Well, that was followed by another message that said that Bella was alive, not well, but he was alive and recuperating at a hospital in Serbia. So Detective Nagy travels to the hospital, but alas, he's a little too late. Bella had fled, and the body of a dead soldier had been placed into his bed. So Detective Nagy alerted all of the Hungarian police. Tips pour in like they do when police say, hey, we're looking for tips come in from all over, and they're usually useless tips. So tips came in from every part of the country, followed by many sightings of Bella around the world. In 1920, a member of the French Foreign Legion reported a fellow legionnaire to authorities on the possibility that it could be Bella. The man who gave the name Hoffman bragged about how good he was with a garrote, which is a wire cord apparatus used to strangle someone.
Or also sometimes called a garrote.
On several later occasions...
No. It's okay. I've heard both.
Sorry, my bad.
I have no idea which is the right way, but I'm just saying I've heard both.
On several later occasions, speculation arose that Bella had faked his death by exchanging identities with a dead soldier during the war. A Hungarian soldier claimed that Bella was imprisoned in Romania for burglary. Another said he died of yellow fever in Turkey. This man is a true mystery. In 1932, homicide detective Harry Oswald was certain that he saw Bella walking out of Times Square, the Times Square subway. Oswald was nicknamed the camera eye by his colleagues because he had an extraordinary recall for faces. Unfortunately, Times Square, even in the 1930s, huge crowd. So it prevented Detective Oswald from pursuing the suspect. After that, people became convinced that Bella, who would have been in his 60s at the time, was living in New York and working as a janitor. Police checked into this theory, but the guy that they were looking for disappeared. Aside from the murders in Sincoda, no other murders were ever attributed to Bella, and he became quite the stuff of legend. A Swedish metal band called Puss recorded songs about him. French surrealist poet and actor and playwright and Antonin Artaud wrote a scenario for a silent movie inspired by Bella. It never made it into a film, The film was called 32. It appears in volume 3 of R. Todd's collected works. In 32, the Bella figure is a medical professor. A distressed young woman approaches him after attending one of his lectures. She pours out her sob story. She's involved with a man who left her. The professor appears sympathetic. He invites her to his home. She notices 32 large canisters. She's baffled and frightened, and she makes a quick getaway. Later, the Great War breaks out, and the instructor is called away. People hear about the young professor dying in battle, then remember that it was said that he was hoarding paraffin at his home. Authorities open the containers and find dead women strangled with a cord.
little on point.
Yeah, exactly. Bella also made it into the movies with some significant changes. The 1940 film The Mad Doctor, about a Middle European doctor who marries and then murders wealthy women with the assistance of a friend, possibly his lover, Martin. This movie includes a loosely based reenactment of the Oswald subway meeting. And Bella Kiss was never found. But I'm rest assured, Adam, he would be over 100 and something, so I'm sure he's dead. You have nothing to fear.
Yeah, I'm not a
you.
attractive woman, so I don't think I'd be his type.
But there you go. That's the story of Bella Kiss. I told you a story from the 1800s.
No, not at all boring. It actually is very apropos to my side tonight.
All right. So there we go. We'll get to your side here in just a second.
This is Kevin Armstrong, your host for Movie Battle. Each episode, we take two films and put a superfan of each against one another to decide which one is best. The only rule we have is that you come correct. If you're interested in being a guest on Movie Battle, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
Welcome back to the A-Side, B-Side podcast. It is now time for my side, which is the A-Side. But so often, I feel that there's a disconnect between the A-Side and the B-Side, in that often Brooke tells these stories of incredible disbelief at some points, and also horrible reality and murders. And then every once in a while, I'm like, hey, do you guys remember that one film? So this week, after a post that Brooke did about how last week's villain, for lack of a better term, or murderess, or the star of her side, was from her hometown, as most of my existence, it spawned a bit of a black hole that I went down, because I started to ask myself, so here's, like, Brooke has grown up in this town. She is a huge fan of Buffalo, but this is the first time that we've had a story from her hometown, and we all have hometowns.
Wrong story.
I'm sorry. This is a couple of weeks ago. I'm sorry. A couple weeks ago. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No,
okay.
You're not from Australia.
Okay.
I mean, you could be, which would be pretty weird.
No.
But, so it was 2 weeks ago, right? 2 or 3 weeks ago. Anyway, previous episode, about a month ago.
About a month ago. But
time,
yes.
really, what does it matter? It got me thinking about stories about hometowns and how towns connect with murders. And I've been very blessed that I have really one story that eventually turned into a murder that I remember from my hometown as a kid. But I'm not...
Hold up. Are you still on my shtick here? Talking about murders?
Wait for it.
Okay.
You did.
All right. I just pulled it out.
I kind of love it. So I started thinking about all of the hometowns of television series that have had so many murders. And it's not like if you are like, so like The Wire was based in Baltimore. Baltimore is a giant city. It was focused on gang violence, and like that was statistically the number of violent actions in that show are not out of bounds for the size of the city that the show takes place in. In fact, if you go look back at like some of the shows that happened in the 60s, 70s, even 50s, so like look at Dragnet, You look at Columbo, Matlock, Heart to Heart, all these shows that were murder mysteries, but not really. They were more mysteries that happened in like Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s. In those shows, statistically, the murder rate didn't even meet the cities that they took place in. However, there are many fictional cities where the murder rates are just way, way out of control. And once I dove down this black hole, I was disturbed to find out how many of these fictional cities that had murder rates that were way out of line are also my favorite shows. So we do a true crime podcast on one side and mostly nostalgia on the other. But I think I figured out why I enjoy listening to Brooke's stories is because I've been watching stories like this in fiction for my entire life. So back in 2013, the BBC decided to do a empirical study of deaths in fictional towns relative to reality, which I don't know why BBC decided to do this. I think they probably had an intern that didn't have anything to do. So they were like, dude, just do this. And one of my favorite shows that they started to investigate was Midsummer Murders. So Midsummer Murders is a sort of Agatha Christie, Miss Marple, Poirot style, like even a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, where it talks about a county sheriff detective who's trying to figure out these murders, but it takes place in a very small county. And the county is most relative to Oxfordshire. They call it Midsummer County in the show, but Oxfordshire is pretty tiny. And if you added up all of the murders that happen in Midsummer Murders, and it's 2.3 an episode, and they have 10 to 13 episodes, or I'm sorry, 8 to 10 episodes a season, and they've been going for 23 seasons, means that their rate of death via homicide is literally 3 times what would be in any English county that isn't a major city. So it appears that Midsummer Murders is probably upping the death rate just a little bit much. And I was like, wow, that's way out of bounds. Like so high. I can't believe they did that. And then the BBC decided to take one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite series, and kind of ruin it. So the BBC said to themselves, like, okay, Midsummer Murders, which is one of our own BBC shows, is killing people at a 3 times the rate of what they should be for that county size. But let's find something else that's worse. So these researchers decided to go back and cast a negative light on the most idyllic of northeastern United States towns, Cabot Cove, Maine, the home of Jessica Fletcher, who quite frankly is basically Miss Marple. And they decided, by looking at all of the episodes and the number of deaths per episode and the likely size of that city, that Cabot Cove was actually the most dangerous place on Earth, if it was real. In the sleepy hometown of Cabot Cove, it has a rate of 1,490 murders per million people. Now, granted, Cabot Cove has like
Are there even
3,
a million people there?
which means that like 45% of
So
the
then
town
all their
dies
people are dead.
in the course of the show, which is very sad for me as someone who's watched that show with my parents when I was a kid. I love Jessica Fletcher. It was very hard for me when I saw the actress in any other role, because I always thought she was just Jessica Fletcher. If you've never seen the original Manchurian Candidate, very creepy. She does an exceptional job as sort of a very creepy Lady Macbeth who wants her son to become president. But I also always knew her as Jessica Fletcher. So imagine, Midsummer Murders, which is a television series that has been on for 23 years, the average murder rate in that town has been 1 per 32 million, or 32 per million. In Cabot Cove, it was 1,490 per million. So that is roughly, I don't know, I'm not good at math, but that is 4,500% more, or 450% more. So I would just say, if you are in a fictional reality, don't go to Cabot Cove. Also, don't go to a fictional county in England. But the one thing that they also found in this research was that the vast majority of the murders in both Midsummer Murders or Murder, She Wrote, or any of the, like, even if you like went out to CSI Miami, CSI New York, or any of the cop procedurals in England, the vast majority, more than 95% of the murders in those stories were stranger murders. And in reality, those are the least likely type of murders. So today we talked about, in your story, this gentleman who put a ad in the paper and would find these women and strangle and or kill them at some point, and they were strangers. But that is the least likely type of murder in reality. The most common in modern civilization, whether it be America or any other country, the number one most at risk for death is a child under 1. And they are most often, not killed by a stranger. It's by family, by someone they know. And most people, whether it is man, woman, child, you are more likely to be killed by somebody you know than by a stranger. Much more likely, statistically. And yet, all of our fiction, most of that focuses on a stranger coming to kill you. And often at a ridiculous rate that doesn't match reality. So by diving into this weird black hole of, like, in a fictional series, how often do people die? It is a weird, and this is not a term that I'm truly familiar with or know that I'm using correctly, but it feels like entertainment is gaslighting us in a way, or leading us astray, that who we should fear the most is strangers. When in reality, most murders and most crimes happen with someone you know.
I have to disagree with that, because if you ask any true crime person, any police officer, when someone is hurt,
right? No, that's reality.
Spouse.
But I think when we watch shows, they always say it's going to be this, like, weird boogeyman or a serial killer or somebody we don't know, where in reality, it's not always, more likely someone you do know.
Yeah. But you said it as if it's supposed to, entertainment is supposed to make us think that that's reality.
I would say the entertainment is not showing us reality. That was, I guess I said that in a weird way. I didn't mean to say it that way.
Okay.
I think entertainment is distracting us from what is reality. So it makes us feel like when someone who is close to us is the perpetrator, that is unlikely, because on TV we always see it some random character, or the butler, or this serial killer who has a thing for dolls or something. It's very rarely the truth, which is many assaults, crimes against persons, and murders especially, happen between people who know each other. And so for me, that was just a weird, eye-opening thing, where I've been watching these murder mysteries for so long that I wondered, does this bias me against reality? Because I always think it's supposed to be somebody else. And rarely does entertainment show us being somebody close to home. So after listening to how many stories, like all of our stories, many of your stories, it's somebody within the household. And that kind of made me step up and say, after understanding mysteries in this way, have I been biased by the entertainment I've chosen? I have. I think I have.
In your conclusion?
I've always been waiting for some big bad, or some, like, oh, it's got to be somebody who's this, like, serial killer or this person who had a vendetta somewhere, or like it was like a mob killing. And most people, and murders are thankfully not super common, but most murders are done by people who know the other person. Hitmen are not a thing that really impacts most people's lives. I mean, random serial killers do not account for enough of the murders in the country comparative to how we tell stories about them. Mm-hmm. I worry that fiction has biased me against the reality of what violence and murder is.
And your solution?
I would say listen to more podcasts. Because I mean, I know it sounds silly, but like it's not a question I'd ever ask myself if we hadn't done this podcast. But having heard true crime stories and then turning around and watching fiction, there is a disconnect. And in fiction, the bad guy is always somebody else. It's never like, it's occasionally someone close, but it doesn't match up with the statistics of reality. And that is a eye-opening thing for me that has happened in the last week that is not entirely comfortable for me to be part of. But I think there is a definite place for true crime stories that challenge the expectations that entertainment has given us for hundreds of years.
So is that the A-side?
That's the A-side.
All right. Before we go, thank you to everybody that has joined on with us. It's so wonderful to have you. I don't think I can stress enough. Thank you so much for the reviews and the ratings and the follows. And man, I can't tell you how much it means, because, this was just something that we started, to have a good time. And of course, we always have a good time because I can always talk about murder and serial killers. But thank you so much. Also, wear your mask.
Some good ones.
Need one? We got some. But seriously, wear your mask. We do have some good ones. And we are just days away from the election. So make sure you use your voice. I have my ballot, my mail-in ballot. I'm holding it literally in my hands right now. So this is crucial. Use your voice, be heard, vote. And because we do like to show love around here. If you are looking, after you finish this episode, check out the podcast called This Is Actually Happening. They're all really powerful. There's no narrator or anything. It's just the person giving their story. And episode 49, the other day I listened to that one, and man, that was a really powerful episode. You don't know names. It's just their story. It's just the person giving their story. I'm sure if you did a deep dive, you might be able to find out that information, but check that out. And American Murder on Netflix, Wilderness of Air on Hulu. Still watching Lovecraft Country on HBO Max. There's only a couple episodes left, and I'm kind of sad because it's a wild ride, I'm telling you, but it's so good. That's all I got.
Oh, I'm good. Yeah. I said a lot of words, and most people only have so many words to say in a day, and I think I've used all of them.
All right. Thanks for joining us on another episode
of
Brooke. A-Side, B-Side podcast. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of A-Side, B-Side podcast. We really hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, we'd appreciate it if you'd head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And make sure you come back next Friday for another episode.